Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest reviewer self-reflection, where I take a meta look at what I'm doing, what we're doing here as content creators. We stand in the middle. We have publishers who are making games and want to spread the word. We have audience members who want to play games, find the best value for them, make their purchasing decisions. We stand right in the middle of all that, and that creates a lot of issues to explore. Unfortunately, here in May of 2023, some things have happened that have brought us to what I think is a genuine crisis point. I use that word very intentionally. Don't back down from it. It is in the title of the video. Really think that we're in a crisis of trust. So there was a precipitating incident, which happened about a week ago as I record this. In short, there was a YouTube channel called Quackalope. They were accused by a publisher, Into the Unknown, maker of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, of basically blackmail, which is a really dark word that the publisher did not use that word specifically, but the effect was that the accusation, at least, was that this channel made some negative videos and went to the publisher and offered to engage in a relationship where there was going to be some money exchanged, or if there was going to be no relationship, then whatever existing videos, presumably negative ones, were going to be published. So there's a lot of ways to state that interaction. I'm going to go through that. And not because I want to relitigate this stuff. I mean, it's been a week if people want to move on, but I think that particular interaction really it's like, hitting a wound. It's like, someone has a wound and it's like, just wham, like hits it right square. In terms of what some folks in the hobby, in our community, think of what content creators are doing generally, which is that many of us, in an effort to cozy up to publishers, keep the money coming, keep the quote unquote free games coming. In order to do that, we are burying our own negative opinions and trying to shine the best possible light, kind of get one over on our audience for our own benefit. So that has lurked under the surface. And we're talking years. I have many conversations here on the channel about that very issue. And so the reason why I wanted to, talk about this today was because this incident, while, really there was a lot of thing that happened to kind of create a lot of attention to it, but it points to a larger suspicion we have in the hobby. And I truly believe if we don't take a step back and look at the bigger picture, look at what we're doing, we are going to just continue to go down this road, and trust is going to erode further and further. So this video, the intention is to take a look at the bigger picture. What's happening? Why are we here? And how can we move forward in the best ways? And when I say that, this isn't just about, okay, let's just forget it and move on. I mean, like, there's going to be some, accountability that needs to be taken. How do we do, accountability and looking at and dealing with the issues in a real way that, kind of gets at what needs to be done, but then gives us a space to move forward and become a better community for everybody. The creators, the publishers, and the audience members, we're all part of this community, so it's worth the effort to work through the issues. This is Shelf Stories. This is my editorial channel where I engage in above-the-table conversation about all sorts of topics in the hobby that don't directly have to do with games, but that are very important, I feel, in terms of how we build our community and interact with one another around this wonderful hobby. In that spirit, I will never monetize this space. We engage in serious issues here, me and anybody who chooses to comment and interact. I do not want advertising jutting in there and kind of muddying the message. So if you want to support me, the best way you can do that is drop those comments. Kind ones are appreciated. Or if you want to disagree, I'm cool with that, as long as the disagreement is expressed in kindness, respecting my good faith. I will respect your good faith as a commenter. That's all works out for me really well. You can also hit that subscribe button if you haven't done already, like the video, and most importantly, share it out. Tell your friends what I'm doing here on the channel. If you do any of those things, thank you. I greatly appreciate it. So right at the very outset, let me go ahead and disclose some of my relationships and some of my motivations here. So at the center of this whole thing is the Quackalope channel, which is a person, Jesse Anderson. So I have had the chance to be welcomed into his home, break bread, make a video together, Master of the Universe board game, a Kickstarter project from Simon. And I met Jesse's lovely fiance, now wife, Shira. Congratulations to them. And met Jan, who is a great friend, has since moved on from the channel, and others have come in afterwards. And you know what? The interaction didn't stop there. I've hit up Jesse a couple times to understand, in particular, YouTube and how to navigate this whole thing. I don't really, I'm terrible at this stuff. So getting knowledge was necessary. Very open and very friendly with their time. So I do have a predisposition to interpret what was going on a little bit charitably. At the same time, I do have a lot of people in the hobby that I love and I respect who have a huge amount of disagreement and distrust with some of the practices that Jesse has engaged in as part of the Quackalope channel, getting attention for what they're doing over there. So I was just kind of like laying it out there, where I'm coming from with all this. And also Into the Unknown, the publisher. I have not worked with them directly, but they worked with the One Stop Co-op Shop, particularly Mike and Bernd and Steve and Peter, the whole gang, actually. On the first Kickstarter, when Aeon Trespass Odyssey first came online, and also we did a preview for the second as well. So because I haven't met them, but just kind of observing their actions, they seem like good actors as well. They had made that initial accusation about the actions of Quackalope, and they were asked, including by me, to provide some documents because it was a serious accusation. We just don't want that to kind of hang there, and they came through, let the facts speak for themselves. So I wanted to shout them out as well. So there is a lot here in terms of that particular incident. I say all that because the tendency in our social media discourse is to kind of make it about the person, litigating the person. Once again, I'm only entering into this to kind of draw out larger lessons and point out some of the pit traps that other creators can fall into, so that we can try to avoid some of that in the future. So with that said, let me go ahead and walk through using those documents that were released by Into the Unknown and see if we can get out to the other side. So the issue came to my attention and a lot of people's attention on May the 20th when a Reddit user named Thanatos posted the following. This was during the relaunch of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, so it is live, and so the creators are very interested in presenting their project in the best possible light. So parallel to that, Quackalope had been running a series of videos on Aeon Trespass. Every video starts with Quackalope saying they contacted Into the Unknown, the makers of the game, to do sponsored content. They never answered, so now they got a friend to come on and explain the play and play the game. So that series, was about 5 videos total, I believe, culminates with a video on what they liked about the game, and then a follow-up video on what they disliked. So that second video, it's no longer live, but you can follow the link in that original Reddit post, and they will it'll take you to that video. The thumbnail is in typical Quackalope fashion, kind of titillating and clickbaity. Aeon Trespass is unplayable, and the very first sentence you will hear on that video is, "This may be the worst game that I've ever played." So then it goes on. A commenter on the Kickstarter page brought up the video. And so Into the Unknown made a response. So the response is, not if, for example, a YouTuber contacts you months in advance to say they shot the content, don't like the game, but they can reshoot it for $7,500. Woo-hoo-hoo! We would not respond well to such a proposition. In fact, we would never work with someone like that again. That clearly was the accusation of blackmail that triggered a lot of conversation, and people like myself wanted to see the emails because Into the Unknown said that they had the emails, and then later they released those emails. Let me go ahead and walk through some of those. All right, so I'm not going to read the whole email chain. We're just going to pick out the relevant parts. If you want to see the emails for yourself, then you're more than welcome to do so. They're very available, and I'll have a link in the show notes to a place where you can find them. So basically, there was an initial pitch Quackalope wants to partner with Into the Unknown to make content for it. It begins with, very familiar as a content creator who reaches out to publishers, citing the numbers, 10K views on the unboxing video, 750 likes, which is a pretty good amount. Pointing out that they did successful service with Oathsworn, which is another game that we have covered here on the One Stop Co-op Shop, and talking about what kind of coverage they'll provide. Now, very important to note that they are not going to specifically, quote unquote, review the game. So this is the word review does not occur, but it's like supporting videos, rules, strategy guides, etc. And then there was the payment, which if you're going to ask for payment, then go ahead and disclose in the very first email. I know there's some struggle there because, I think not every creator does that. Please do that. If you're going to charge for your content up front in the very first video, just post that and move on. Anyway, so that's what the original outreach email said. And so after some time, ITO reached back out to Quackalope because, at the end of the day, Quack is a influential person in the hobby. I think they had noticed, an uptick during that first campaign when Quack started to talk about it. So it's like, okay, let's reach back out. But there was a concern about price, noting that $1,500 per video was pretty steep, articulating some questions. So there was a response from Quackalope, and I feel that this is where the main problem lie. So Quack says that they have engaged with the game, made 50 hours, and started recording content based on those 50 hours. But, quote, the experience as a group was quite frustrating overall, struggled with the rules, finding cards throughout the decks, and tracking all the moving parts of ATO. Now, it's interesting because the company did not highlight the context there. So Jesse is saying that they want to love, quote, desperately wanted to play through the campaign, seems like an amazing experience. And so kind of pitching it as, okay, we struggle with the rules, but we want to like the game. We want to present it in a positive light. So, and then there's this invitation. It's like, okay, can someone from ITO help us out, create content? So here we go. If we work in collaboration, we would scrap the footage we have already recorded since we want to be as accurate as possible. If we decide to work independently, we would likely not invest more time beyond 50 hours of content and 8 videos we have recorded. So the email chain goes on from there. In my opinion, doesn't really, get off of that space. It just keeps on going along that same kind of frustrated track. And I'm going to skip that, but I invite you, go ahead and check out the entire email chain if you want to check what my own reading and see if it jives up with yours. Okay, so I think there was a lot of parts of that people kind of latched onto. The idea of the money itself. $1,500 is a pretty good amount for a video. That people went back and forth about that. 50 hours of content. How does a creator spend 50 plus hours of content, not know what's going on? That sounds a little bit funny. But then you think about it, well, it's not just them, it's a team of 4. It's their full-time job. They're making content all the time. I wasn't struck by that either. The issue was the idea that content was made and the offer was to bury it for the sake of more positive content, etc. So I can see the perspective where Quack was coming from, where it's like, okay, these videos that we made are incorrect, and we'll make videos that are going to be factually rules-based correct. And if you know anything about YouTube content creation when it comes to games, people like correct rules. So it's like, all right, we're gonna turn these incorrect videos into correct videos. So that is not the message that was received by ITO. They put out a subsequent statement when they released all the emails where they said the following, quote, "This really changed the tone of the conversation for us. At this point, we really didn't want to go into any collaboration with Mr. Anderson. However, at this point, we felt pushed to a wall because maybe the intended sense was to turn incorrect into correct, which is fine. But what was received was that we're going to turn negative into positive with that building of a relationship and the offer of payment." That is really a difficult position. That goes to that thing that I said at the very beginning of this video. This idea that creators take their negative opinions and bury them for the sake of our own benefit. And so there was a discussion about, what do we call this? We call this blackmail. We call this extortion. Did they mean it? Did they not mean it? And to me, the only thing that matters, and this is from a psychological perspective, this is also from a legal perspective, it's not necessarily what was intended. It was what was the message that was received by the recipient, and was that response reasonable? You look at a message, it's almost like, that you have to connect dots, right? And I've talked about this before, like, humans make meaning, and we present them with information. We have to kind of reconnect the dots in a way that makes sense to us. So what were the dots that were read from on ITO's perspective? Frustrated. Not, okay, the rules were incorrect, but the statement of emotion, frustrated with the experience, indicating that there was some kind of like negative thing coming. Another dot, that there was multiple videos recorded. They're already in the bank, and it is very reasonable to assume that those videos had negative content. And another dot, which is kind of outside of the emails, is the reputation of the channel itself. So the channel likes to play with, clickbaity headlines, and, this game is So I've talked about a controversy that happened, a little while ago, where there was a headline that said, the world doesn't need your mediocre game. Just kind of like, okay, wham, out there. Your game that you're making is mediocre. The world doesn't need it. And so there's a history of those kind of comments. And from the publisher perspective, a negative review can really sink a campaign. And I'll talk more about this in another video, the follow-up to this one. But, especially with a project like that, I still remember the first project, they had to change the pricing, and they had to kind of, repackage things in order to get the project out there. So they're still in a mode of like, okay, well, any negative comment, especially from a person with influence, could harm the campaign. And there's one last data point to consider, which not known at the time, but it turns out there was a bullet in that chamber. Amongst those videos, there was that one that was the quote-unquote hit piece. AI's trespass is unplayable. If you actually watch the video, it articulates a lot of what was mentioned before about, like, mostly it was the rules difficulties, and, they wanted to like the game, all that kind of qualifying stuff, but it's not that when it comes to, YouTube. It is the headline, the attention grabbing, first few seconds of the video, etc., that constituted the threat that it turns out was correctly perceived by the publisher. So I acknowledge that is quite a charitable read of the interpretation, kind of dislocating it from any question of intention and focusing more on the reception on the part of the publisher. So I don't shift it that way as a way of like, okay, saying it doesn't matter. It really does matter, because it gets to that central question of like, who can we trust, which is a huge question that every person needs to answer when they log into a creator. So in this particular case, was it bad intention or good intention, bad acting or good faith? Was it a mafia style shakedown for money, or was it a misunderstanding? And it is worth kind of going through that, and different channels and different forums that I've seen have gone through exactly that. And I guess that without taking anything away from that, I want to use this space for another project, which is to consider that bigger question of trustworthiness. How trustworthy are creators in general? There is a reputation, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, it's the central thread of the video, that not only this person, but all of us, to some level, bury, mute, defang, whatever you want to call it, our genuine critical opinions of products for the sake of coziness with the publisher, our own benefit, review copies, money, or whatever have you, and we're out to kind of take advantage of the community. And the reason I'm going on about this controversy, which is at this point over a week old, and it's like, okay, why are we belaboring this? Because it's not necessarily about the actual injury. It's about the standing wound that injury triggered, which is this difficulty we have with community trust. And that really gets me going. So I'm going to go ahead and spend the rest of the video talking about that. Here is, in my view, the money part of the conversation. Sorry about that. It's about 20 minutes into the video, making people wait for it a little bit, but I really truly feel like I had to walk through all that, preamble stuff in order to get here. Community trust. And very often, when we talk about this thing, whatever this ephemeral quality thing, it becomes translated into numbers. In particular, a number like that. So right now I am showing the subscriber count as I record this of the One Stop Co-op Shop. And I'm on a team, and there's a whole team of us who work to cultivate that number. We see it, rise, and how many subs do we get, and what's the increase over month to month or year to year, whatever it is, and it gives us a lot of joy. And to be clear, it's a lot of it is Mike and Colin on the One Stop Co-op Shop. They're driving that bus, and I play a complimentary role, and I'm happy to do so. We're all happy to be a part of this team that has earned that number, and on one level, it's like, okay, that's the trust that people place in this community. And I'll break down what I mean by that in just a little bit. But there is another side to that. And that's where the cynicism and the skepticism kind of sneaks in. So I will be pretty open about how this works. So a lot of times either a publisher will reach out to us or we'll reach out to a publisher. And, my name is Jason Perez. I'm from the One Stop Co-op Shop. Here's a link to, our channel. Here is our subscriber count. Here is the number of clicks our videos get. Here's the number of likes, number of engagement, the size of our community, etc. And the person who reached out to ITO in that original email situation, here's the views. That at the end of the day is the value that we bring to publishers. So a publisher will look at that and determine whether, either the size of the number, the quality of the number, etc., is worth that engagement. So then there becomes that engagement piece. It's like, okay, how can we collaborate to help, bring products, expose audience members to products they might like. So that's kind of how it works. Unfortunately, where I think the process breaks down is where we kind of take those numbers and remove them from the context that number means nothing without the trust of the community. At the end of the day, it is the only thing, or I shouldn't say the only thing, but really the main thing that we have to offer of value to publishers. And there's other things too, there is, the quality of our camera work and our, charismatic presentation and all the things that go into creating videos. And I think that creators can kind of focus on that stuff, the stuff that we're bringing. None of that will rise to the level of getting the attention to a publisher without that community trust. That community trust is the engine that makes all of this possible. And I'm saying that over and over again because the central charge is that we're taking that trust for granted. And there was a particular creator that we're focusing on, but I think, there is a sense in which many of us, I'll say us, this is something I struggle with, take that number for granted. All right, so let me go ahead and zoom the camera back just a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and show this graph. That's our subscriber number. And I'm just going to use the One Stop Co-op Shop because that's the one I know. So what does this line mean? When I say that we're prone sometimes taking that number for granted, what I mean is interpreting that number as a transaction. Right? So we put in work. We get the game, learn it, play it, film it, edit, do the different tricks that we do in order to make videos look as good as possible. All the things, right? So that is the thing that we are offering to the audience, and the audience, they get something out of it, right? So they I love this game. And they comment, and we love those comments. Or, you get the funny comment of okay, how dare you injure my wallet, and please don't injure my wallet again, as they're holding it out. I imagine that in my head. And it's fun, right? So they're getting, value and entertainment and knowledge about products, and we're doing our thing on our end, and there's a transaction there, and it's fine, right? And there's definitely a group of folks who treat this transactionally. And it's just like, a one-to-one thing. Not going to, minimize that. That's definitely there. It's not the only story. There is another part that is a lot more emotionally invested. And I'm going to borrow from the Board Game Dojo podcast. They did a great job. I just discovered it. It's only about a year old. The host, Eric, who's a psychologist, really broke down the psychology of marketing in a very intelligent way. And I'm going to link that show here in the show notes. So I'm going to borrow a couple concepts from that show. So if there is a section of the audience that is in it for on a transactional way, there is another whole section of the audience that is engaged in a whole new way that psychologists call a parasocial relationship. And I don't know how that breaks down. I have it kind of split evenly. Maybe it's kind of the slider is somewhere. And, even within the parasocial relationships, they're all different. They can be really strong or they can be really weak. Point being, that there is that level of emotional investment. A parasocial relationship is when an audience member makes a relationship of a kind with a creator. They feel like they know the person. It's not just a transaction. Seeing that person makes them happy, or they can imagine conversations with that person, etc. And we all know this as creators. So, of any size whatsoever. So like we go to cons and, we interact with people in different places and, hey, Jason, there he is, Shelf Stories, or whatever it is. What? And it's not just like, okay, kind of this sheepish, like, oh, hi, how you doing, everything. No, you get that too. But there'll be, interactions where like the person feels like they know us and they're interacting with us as if they know us. That's where we get into the parasocial relationship. And honestly, that's pretty freaking dope when it happens. And I'm a, kind of a low to mid-size creator. I'm not going to, overstate my influence. I mean, you look at, I've seen how folks relate to Tom Vassell, so to speak. I used to be one of the person, oh my God, it's Tom Vassell. And, the Rodney Smiths and everything who I've had a chance to meet in person as well. See how people relate to them. It's like there's a relationship there, a parasocial relationship. So when we think of that subscriber number, I want to think in terms of both of those things at once. And especially the parasocial one, because at the end of the day, it's that the healthiness of the parasocial relationship has a lot to do with how big this number is. If we have that good reputation, if we make people feel good, then those people will bring their enthusiasm and spread the word about what we're doing. So, people will say, okay, well, this person is a trustworthy person and this person, I like them and I'm entertained by them, and they spread the word in their own circles. It's not just us. It's them too. I always almost think of it as like, that's the real genuine water that can grow that number organically. And here on the One Stop Co-op Shop, we really try that. We really try to keep that in mind. And, we haven't done a lot of stunts. We haven't done a lot of like, okay, here's a subscriber. Here's a big giveaway. Here's whatever. I mean, we do give away stuff. Don't get, Colin used to give away, stuff, and that definitely helped the numbers as well. But, we've stepped off on that. It isn't a centerpiece of our, what we're doing. And we're just kind of like, kind of workmanlike, making videos, interact with the audience, growing it organically, building those relationships. And to us, that's the valuable stuff, where we know that people are entering in a parasocial relationship with us, and we're trying to respect that as much as possible. And so like a lot of things on social media, there's positives and there's negatives, and we'll definitely get to the very real negatives in just a minute. But there's a lot of positive stuff that could come out of a parasocial relationship. And I live that. We have coming off of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I started my channel, Shelf Stories, basically in response to what was going on. I had to do something, right? And a lot of people in the creation space, got their start by, being locked up and having to figure out what to do. So I started in June of 2020, and towards the end of the year, it was around like October, November. where, the lockup happened and then people came out and then, the disease came back again, another wave of it. People are locking back in again. And there was some pretty miserable holiday seasons out there in 2020. So the most engagement I've ever gotten on a video, the highest view count here on Shelf Stories to this day, all the stuff that I've done, Good Trouble and Shelf Help and everything. The highest one was when I did a commentary on the top 100 solo games of 2020. Now, I carried that over from my podcast. So I'd done it like 3 years prior. So it was like a regular thing. It was known, right? It was the first time I put it on video. So I had a couple of guests on, and we had just a chat about 200 popular solo games compiled in a list by BGG's own Kevin Erskine, a member of the One Player Guild. Shout out to Kevin. Love that man. So people watched us have friendly interactions, and it was so much warmth and grace and gratitude for what we were doing. In a dark time, it felt like, people were truly engaged and moved by just being around people who seem to enjoy each other's company or are talking about a joyful thing. And to this day, I've yet to replicate that, in my content, again, with everything that has gone on so far. So that is the best of a parasocial relationship. It's not just transactional. I didn't just provide value for them. They needed something. They needed friendship. They needed to kind of connect with somebody on a level. And where it was physically impossible, it became virtually possible. And it wasn't, it's not the best, and it's not like, it's a poor replacement for the real thing, but it did the job, and it's right there for people, to enjoy. So it's like on that level, the parasocial relationships are great. And I think ask any content creator who's had that experience or who's had the con experience of people interchanging. That stuff is super positive and welcome. Where that becomes a difficulty is that parasocial relationships, like any relationship, you take the good with the difficult and issue creating. So where there's relationship and where there's positive feeling, there's also the influence that relationship creates, because at the end of the day, it's their relationship. On an individual level, they're the ones that are looking at us, in terms of, influencing them on certain things. And it could be a lot of different things, including buying decisions. It kind of drives me a little bit nuts as a psychotherapist, and as someone who wants to, center trust in, our relationships. When I hear creators say, well, I just put my stuff out there and, people have the ability to kind of decide for themselves if they want to listen to us or buy us or click or whatever it is. It doesn't, I have to say this very carefully. I'm just kind of like working through this, right? And I want to be as sensitive as possible to different perspectives. So what I will say is I think that view imagines the subscriber count as that transaction, right? And there are certainly a lot of members of our audience that are into that transaction. But there are a lot of audience members, like it or not, who rely on us for, their purchasing decisions, for so many different reasons, because of that parasocial relationship, because, this person has my taste. So it's like, I'm going to go with the person that I know has my taste. And so there's all these different things, right? And it is a very difficult thing to take the good and kind of minimize the bad. It's almost like, you're driving a car. I love the engine, but I don't like the exhaust. Well, you kind of have to do one with the other, I think, right? If we're going to cultivate this sense of parasocial relationship and, enjoy that, then I think we need to own a lot more intentionally, and I say we, I'm not saying that everyone is kind of falling into this pit trap, but I think it is a pit trap that can be fallen into. Some do, some don't. Every creator has to figure out the extent to which they're doing this, but I think it is worth a think in terms of, are we enjoying those parasocial relationships and celebrating them when it's good? And are we kind of minimizing and shooing away the effects when there's difficulty, specifically influence that we have over people's buying decisions? So that's parasocial relationships on the audience and the creator level, which would be, one thing. But then you have this other entity, the publisher. And their incentive, their job is to move games, right? They make games and they move them and they distribute them. So they have to find all sorts of ways in order to do so. And the traditional way is just straight up marketing, right? And the marketing is often done by a person or entity that doesn't have this whole like parasocial relationship, doesn't have the, any investment in authenticity or whatever it is. They're a marketer. They're just marketing stuff, right? Making it look good and speaking well of it and, spreading the word out, etc. And so that's one part, and that they definitely do that. You see your Facebook ads and, BGG banners and all that kind of thing. That's one thing. But that's not enough in order for a pub, especially a new pub, to really break through. The Kickstarter has kind of really turbocharged this, opening new creators to the space. So ads, well, they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. And so the publisher is looking at these interactions that creators have made with the audience. And as I said, it's not just the transactional stuff that's there, but there's also that parasocial dimension as well. Some people strongly parasocial, some people weakly, but it's there, right? And the publisher is saying, okay, I can sell X number of copies, but if this person who has earned the audience's trust says that my stuff is good, then I can sell even more copies. So let me partner up with this person who has earned the audience's trust, and it was established those, whether it's a parasocial or transactional or whatever, they've established those relationships. Let's give them the product, let them feature it, and then, okay, that will increase the reach. Those relationships on the publisher end are basically like a resource, and a resource, unfortunately, to use and exploit. Different publishers approach it differently. Some people don't take the exploitative end. There's a real, openness, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but there are definitely some out there that, they're looking at the numbers, they're looking at the sales. And if this thing called audience trust and the trust that creators have built, if that can help me sell my game, then that's what we're going to do. And the publishers rely on the creator to, set up those boundaries and negotiate with the audience, etc. It's not the publisher's job, it's our job. That's what we take on when we get this public face and we start to grow that subscriber number. And so here is where it gets really dodgy for us as creators. I'm going to borrow another concept from the Board Game Dojo podcast. Publisher is looking at what we've built as individual creators, and they're looking like, oh, that's the exploitable resource that we can use to get the word out about our games. At that point, the creator is engaged in an act of stealth marketing. There's marketing, it's obvious, it's labeled, it's all over the place. But then stealth marketing is when, in those cases where like the audience member isn't reacting to the marketing because like, oh, you're trying to sell me something, there's an aversion there. But if the publisher can kind of successfully launder their product through the sense of audience trust and have that person pitch the game, then we bypass a lot of things and the audience is much more receptive. And that's happening in a stealth way under, some other processes that might be happening. Now, I heard that on the podcast. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, that's a really, it's a great way to put it. And it's also a challenging way to put it because I have to admit that we do that, when we work with a publisher, there is an element where, at least on the publisher end, they're trying to do some different things in order to get the, leveraging this whole trust resource to get the product out there. That's what they're doing. Is that really what we're doing? Yes, we're participating in that. I have to, we all probably should have a discussion about it. I have to own that. But does our role reduce to that? And does our participation in that inherently nerf our authenticity? Do we nerf our sense of trustworthiness with the audience when we engage in all that, stealth marketing and all that kind of thing? And that's a $64,000 question, isn't it? Who can you trust? it becomes really hard. I think that there's going to be a tendency to be like, all right, you know what? Just paid content is fine. If you're doing, watch plays and your tutorials and, playthroughs, then okay. As long as the audience knows that nothing important is getting buried, something that they need to know. Okay, fine. But then we get into the idea of reviewers. And most of us want to call ourselves reviewers. That's kind of a magic word. Let's be honest. I remember going to PAX Unplugged, and they gave all the media people different badges. Some of us got content creator and some of us got media. And I got content creator. I got stuck with it. It's like, oh, no, I won't be a content creator. Anybody want to trade that media badge? No. Because media, it generates more of a trustworthiness. It's like, okay, I'm more professional and theoretically more independent and all that kind of thing. And reviewer is kind of plays that role. It is a word that is designed to generate trust in the audience. But what are we doing with those reviews? We get review copies. We get to keep the copies. Half my shelf here is review copies. I'll go through them if you really want to. And I clearly state them in all my videos. So that's an open question, right? And then there are people, not the One Stop Co-op Shop. We don't take cash for a lot of different reasons. But people for their various circumstances will say, okay, I'm going to charge however much for this content. Or preview, they'll charge for a preview. It's like, okay, that seems okay. But then 6 months later, a year later, when they get the game, they'll review it. Wait a minute, you got paid for that. How and then it gets to be a little bit of a murky thing. And, I heard about this incident. I'm telling you, this is not just, this Quackalope thing. This is kind of widespread of, the idea that like, okay, our reviews or our opinions are somehow for sale and we're kind of sneaking things by people. So one publisher came into the board game reviewers and media Facebook group. And they posted and they said, okay, I have a game. I have some review copies. Who wants to review it? And a lot of people said, okay, yeah, I'll take a look. And this person posted, however much time later and said, well, some of the people who responded said that they were going to review the game, and then we get into the email conversation, and then somewhere along the way they say, okay, this is how much I charge for the review. Oh my man, you can see, and so that incident that I described on Facebook is emblematic of a sponginess, a blurring of the lines between reviews and previews, paid and unpaid. Who can we trust? I can understand if someone on the outside is looking in on that and going, oh, I don't know what's going on with all that. I mean, even I felt that when I was first getting into the hobby in 2015, 16, looking up, who is doing previews and who is doing reviews. They're the same person. What are we, what's going on here? And, as gaming has developed and we've grown, we're still kind of stuck in some paradigms that I can see, trigger the skepticism of somebody looking in from the outside. And so it goes further than that, though. It just gets even more difficult the more you look into it. And I'm going to go just one more, right? One more level. So in order to get attention, you got to build a following, right? You got to get those publishers to pay attention to you. You want just for yourself, you want to grow that number and, have nice exposure. You're taken seriously. People know you, etc. All the things, right? Because of the way the YouTube algorithm works and the different social media platforms, and because of human psychology, we are incentivized to take advantage of folks' trust and get into some manipulations so that we can get people right in the bits of psychology that'll get them to pay attention. And so the still clip that I'm showing right now is from the very excellent Veritasium website, a science website, talking about clickbait. You see the title. Clickbait is unreasonably effective. So Jason's sitting here going on for however many minutes about trust. Well, if we really want to get down to it and build our numbers, build our subscribers, then we're going to have to engage in some pretty manipulative practices. Clickbait 1 is legit bait. It is an interesting title in various ways. type 2 clickbait, as it is described, click trap, click trick, link trap, dupe shoot. These are obviously terrible words. So going back to the first graph, the legit bait, quote unquote, is an interesting title. Something that reaches out and, grabs you, fascinates you. It's an open-ended question, or it's something, interesting, possibly maybe a little bit controversial. The last thing you want to do is be in that dead zone in the lower left-hand corner. That's a boring title. That's basically an encyclopedia. You want to tickle people's interest when you advertise. So the levers for tickling people's interest are withholding information, which is asking a question. It's like, what are the top 10 XYZ, whatever. Or you put up something misleading or sensationalized. That's where, we get into, this game is a disaster, or, this company is doing somebody wrong. They're robbing it from you. They're stealing from you. They're lying from you, etc. So a lot of creators are incentivized to kind of play with those boundaries because they're fuzzy. They're not clear. You're in that interesting, legit bait type 1 paradigm, but then the incentive is to push and find the boundary. And if you cross the boundary, then you know more and you can kind of, move forward from there. So the reason I bring that up is because, I'll be perfectly honest, Quackalope is the person who showed me this video, and that's what they're doing. That's what they've been doing the entire time, and they're going to likely continue to do it if their recent videos are any indication of pushing that boundary, perhaps engaging in controversy because it's good for their ultimate subscriber number. But what's happening? By withholding information and engaging in sensationalism, they're messing with trust. And honestly, like the clickbait video, I know I'm kind of going on about clickbait. That seems like a diversion, but it's not. That's what created the bullet in the chamber. So we talk about, the shakedown, the bribery, the money, and all that kind of stuff. Well, none of that is possible if there wasn't this possibility of like the totally sensational headline that can sink a campaign. And that's what creates the fear, and that's what creates all that agita. And how did that person get to the point where they could put bullets in the chamber? Well, those bullets are made of our interest and our trust. And so I know, I always kind of edge a little bit into trouble with this stuff where it's like, okay, well, what are you saying? Are you saying like this person is, are they bad or good, right? I don't want to adjudicate the question of good actor, bad actor, etc. I'll let, the people's experience speak for themselves. What I am saying is that dude is following incentives. The YouTube algorithms and the way psychology work combined with the kind of spongy ethics and standards that are not very well formed, combine all that, and we have a set of incentives that even if this person doesn't, continue to engage, the incentives are there for a lot of other people to engage, and that, for me, is going to erode trust faster than anything else that we can do. All right, that seems really a gloomy place to kind of come to a culmination point with this video. So who can you trust? Doesn't sound like you can trust very many of us after all. Only like the person who, Rodney Smith or Paul Grogan, people who barely give their any opinion at all when it comes to their main video output. So, and even then, I know those creators are kind of bummed out by what's happening too. Because the nature of the distrust can pervade and even get to those particular creators as well, let alone ones who want to offer opinions like we do here in the One Stop Co-op Shop and many, many others as well. So I am going to make a separate video. I don't just want to kind of put a bunch of problems. I'm going to do a part 2 where I'm going to try to come up with solutions, ideas that people have had, different perspectives, different paradigms. So I'm going to save all that for a second video. I know I'm pretty far into this one. There's going to be another one, but there's a lot to say. And this is a culmination of years of reflection and thinking about this topic. So please bear with me, and thank you very much for those who have been with me so far. So I'm hopeful because even though there's all these incentives to mess with audience trust and ultimately corrode it. We don't have to follow incentives. I think there is foundation to do things the right way and build audience trust the right way. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what is the answer to that question? Who can you trust? I think the beginning of that answer is, well, you can trust creators who talk about trust. And you can trust creators who think in terms of trust. And, that doesn't preclude going for numbers and having publisher relationships. And I'll talk about some of those boundaries in the next video. But at the very least, as long as that conversation is happening in the channels that you like to enjoy, then I think we're on the path, at least the beginning of a path, to a more constructive place. So that's what this video is all about. A huge video talking about trust, many, many different topics. So please join me in the comments. Let's engage in a conversation. What do you think? Do you think that's a good answer? The best way to think about who can you trust is, a set of creators who talk about this stuff explicitly. That's my answer. What do you think? What do you think about stealth marketing? What do you think about parasocial relationships? Some of the more psychological concepts that I brought up in this video. So much has been covered, and I'm eager to have conversations on this video and also the follow-up, which will be coming up really soon. As always, my closing on Shelf Stories: if you could change your mind, you could change the world, people. So until next time, later, everybody.